Alright, hey everyone, and welcome to what I think is probably an unexpected video from me. We've jumped into turn 3 of a new game of Dominions 5 multiplayer. This is a game that I wasn't originally intending to record, and as a result I haven't cached all the turns in the early game, so in the first episodes of this series we won't be able to cover every turn. We'll sort of be jumping around talking about the plan and then see how the plan eventuated. But I've seen that General Confusion is posting this game, and there's enough personalities in this series, and the concept is interesting enough that I thought, let's do it. So what game is this? This is Accidental Ascension 5, Late Era. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the concept of Accidental Ascension, it involves everyone involved playing randomly selected nations. So what happens is they give you a selection of 3 randomly rolled nations that you have to pick from. And in my case, I then rolled randomly against those 3 that I was given again, and somehow I drew Late Age Atlantis, which is one of the very few nations I've actually played. So somehow, in still what is not, I'm not a veteran by any means. This is like game 3 or 4 for me at this point of Dominions 5. I'm somehow playing a repeat on a nation. So there we are, random chance. So you get a random nation, and you also get a randomly rolled god. And the way this happens is they use the random generation tool. They give you the option. You can either accept it or reject it. If you reject it, they roll again. And if you reject that one, you get given a third one, which you can't reject. You have to keep. Now, notably, if you reject your first one, you can't then choose your first one again later. You're throwing it away and chancing with the dice again. So we'll talk about god selection in this game. But first I just wanted to introduce you to where I am on the map, how many players are on the map, give you some idea of my early positioning, and then we're going to close the episode out by walking through the gods of those that are located relatively close to us. So mostly the gods of our immediate neighbours, which I'll identify based on things that have happened in future turns, because I'm recording this one as of turn... I'm recording this at around turn 9. 9 or 10. Can't remember. I'll have to reconnect later and see what it is. Anyway, so let's have a look at this map. Let's have a look at our nation. Let's do a quick reprise on on Atlantis, talk about what we're doing early and what we're doing in terms of contacting our neighbours. So this is a map that's generated with one of the improved map generation tools, and as a result, we know for a fact that we're going to be very close to our neighbours. There'll be... Ideally, there'll be 2 provinces clear for each player, and then a third in the middle, which is contested, or 3 between each person and 1 in the middle that's contested. So it'll be relatively even. This map is very short on water generation, which is really unfortunate for Late Age Atlantis, because Atlantis loves sailing, and Atlantis can only recruit its good mages in the water. You need water to get access to your mages, and we'll talk about Atlantis again in a moment. So we've spawned next to a very small lake, which will limit our recruitment ability. We'll need this pond down here as a matter of strategic significance in order to get our mages as well. But we've got a little bit of mobility around here, because we'll be able to reach these provinces. All these provinces here are within 1 move range by sailing. This is probably going to be close to someone. In fact, I know that's close to Abyssia, who's being played by Ascension in this game. So we probably won't get that one, but we'll definitely want these provinces along here because they're all within 1 move. Similarly, we'll want to round up this area along here later on. The other elements that we've identified in terms of what we've spawned around is how difficult those things are. Atlantis gets a relatively strong starting army, so we immediately moved out and attacked some weak independents to just get a high resource province, which we had dominion over, so we knew it was high resource to get our troop production going. And what my strategy has essentially been is I'm going to go for 1 recruitment, 1 sort of expansion army every probably 2 turns at this rate. Our initial army is composed of the starting army of Atlantis, which is these troops here, plus a recruitment round of 1 recruitment round of Sacreds, and our prophet, who is son of Iroke. Now you'll remember my prophet. Now you won't remember, I never posted the videos. My prophet in the first game was Iroke, because I forgot to rename him. So son of Iroke is going to lead Atlantis to victory yet again. And we're hopefully going to expand out, kill some lizard warriors and crocodiles over here. Hopefully that's a lizard recruitment province. And if that's so, it'll give me an alternative to recruiting Tungaliks, which are pretty useless for anything other than research purposes. It'll give me access to lizard mages instead. So here's hoping on that one. That's why I've prioritized that province. We're recruiting a mixture of our sacreds, our asatuts, and mournfuls, because they're low resource troops. And right now what we need is, we have gold, we're spending gold, we're not recruiting our expensive cap onlys, we're recruiting researchers who double as leaders. So Tungaliks double as leaders, which means we can retire them to the research home later on, and use them as commanders initially. It's inefficient in gold up front, but hey, a snow captain is 70 gold, right? And these guys are 110, but you get a researcher after all is said and done, so that's great. So we're using a mixture of these at the start. We've recruited 7 last turn. We'll recruit another round, and then we'll be probably able to go kill these Zots, eventually kill these troops down here, get into that pond. These Tritons will be very easy to kill. It's a valuable province, so we may even go there first. The reason I wouldn't normally prioritize water first is because no one around here can swim, and so these provinces are basically guaranteed to be mine. Like, no one will contest these, and if they contest them, I'll knock them out really easy. So getting land provinces and establishing borders early is going to be an absolute priority. So that's where we are early game. Let's talk about Atlantis. Then let's talk all gods and in the context of our neighbours. So I'll list our neighbours after we've talked about Atlantis, but before we switch over to having a look at the gods. Atlantis, you'll remember I've done a video, and I may end up talking about other elements of Atlantis in this video rather than doing a second part of that nation analysis guide, just because it's convenient to do it while playing. Atlantis is a strong troop nation that is resource intensive. They have underwater options which are much less resource intensive. So you have 2 brands of troops, on land, on water. The on land troops are generally better than the underwater troops. The opposite relationship is true with your land recruit mages. So on land you have, with the exception of your cap only, you have a great cap only. Very expensive, 425 gold, the Ungercock, but the Ungercock is 3 water, 2 death, randoms these paths, and that can give you very useful cross paths in all of these areas. Earth ones can thug, D3s are always valuable. Air is the cross path you need with death for things like Wind of Death and Wailing Winds, which is really cool if you random one. The Holy 2 is irrelevant, but most importantly, sailing, size points 999, max size 6. So these guys don't sail ships. They create sort of moving glaciers of ice because they have power over ice, and they just carry everyone on a sheet of ice across the ocean. So you can move as many troops as they can lead. So if you boost them, you're good to go. They can lead undead, magic, and standard troops, all of which is good. So we'll want as many Ungercock as we can recruit. The Tungalik is a cost-effective researcher and useless at just about everything else except for the fact that he has 40 leadership points, so you can use him early. Water 1, Death 1 is not a good combat mage, but hey, it's a decent utility pick in the early game. Later on, they are good for nothing other than researching until you get Frozen Heart, and even then, people just get cold resistance. You have good commanders, and you have a great scout who has 10 leadership and a lot of extra bonuses that an ordinary scout doesn't have. Underwater, however, you get a communion mage. He's relatively expensive, water 2, astral 1, and then fire, water, earth, astral 100% random. Not sacred, so not a cost-efficient researcher, but a fast researcher. Minor gift of water breathing, so I can use some land recruit troops with them and the Ungercocks, but it's not particularly practical. Void Sanity is irrelevant in this game because there is no relay. So these guys give you a communion, access to fire, earth, and water, as well as astral itself. They're not efficient communions because these guys are really expensive, but they're communion mages, and they're a tough communion chassis. They're 20 hit points, which is helpful, especially if you get nature into your communions. They're just tougher once you start buffing them with earth magic and getting them regenerating and things like that. They're solid. So you want your mages from underwater and your troops from land normally. However, Atlantis is normally a production 3 nation. To get access to these really cool ice troops, who are, I think probably in Cold 3, these are better than Ormish infantry. They're much more expensive, I'm saying in terms of raw stats, because they have all these extra hit points and they're really quite agile and have good stats, and they're stronger than Ormish troops. They are more expensive, however, so that sort of balances them out. But hey, Ormish troops are amazing, so the fact that we're arguing over which one you'd rather have on a nation, I think I'd rather pick Ormish, but hey, these guys are amphibious too, which is very, very good. I don't have production. We'll switch and talk about our gods when we talk about all the gods, but our scales for this game are Magic 2, Luck 3, we have Cold 2, but we start in summer, obviously. I would have liked Cold 3. We have Order 1, and we have 10 Dominion. You heard that right, we have 10 Dominion, because we are running, well, we're not running, we were given and we chose an imprisoned statue with decent scales. Our Bless, as such, is mostly incarnate and mostly offline, which is unfortunate, but we didn't really want to Bless for Atlantis anyway. This Magic 2 is good. It will allow us to get 11 research points out of every Tungalik, who is only costing us 44 gold a year. So we will have good, efficient research. We'll be up there, we'll be competitive in research. Luck 3, Magic 2 as a combination means that we should be pretty good in terms of magic, randoming gems, which is very good. A little bit of Order reduces the frequency of those events, but also allows you access to some extra events that are only unlocked by having Order. Cold 2 is suboptimal. Cold 3 would have been much more optimal from a points perspective, as would going down to Dominion like 6 or 7 rather than Dominion 10. Very needlessly expensive, and with that I would have bought Growth and Production. We are growth neutral, which is unfortunate, but I didn't want to risk going downhill, and I'll talk about that in terms of metrics on why I chose my god when we flash up the gods in a moment. But suffice to say, I took this because my principle with Atlantis was the nation is so good that you should, with your god, first do no harm. Just keep decent scales and make sure you're not ruining the nation. Had I randomed Heat 3, had I randomed Drain scales, had I randomed Sloth, I'd be stuffed. So I was happy to take the scales that were offered to me. Last thing before we switch over to gods is let's talk about who's around us so that it makes sense as to which gods I talk about later. Patala which is the monkey nation. Pindar in Patala is over here somewhere. Bogarus is up around here somewhere. Erythea, I think around here. Erythea is up here. So the other water nation is up there. Utgard, the human giant cross nation, is to my due north. Olm is to my due south. Gath is to my southwest. Phlegra is somewhere over here to my far southwest. Abyssia is due west, and Jibolba is northwest. So that's my neighborhood. As for who this is, then you can see this is the top end of this lake over here. So we're relatively compact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 gods in this game rather than down from the 20 in the previous game. And we'll go have a look at some of their gods in a moment. But we are the second Paris Accords. My god in the previous Atlantis game, of course, being the Paris Climate Accords. This is the second Paris Climate Accords. Alright, I'm going to switch over and show you the god. Alright. First time recording outside of the game, so if I mess anything up here, please forgive me. The reason I wanted to join an accidental Ascension game, the reason I jumped at the chance, is because the idea is hilarious. Dominion's multiplayer tends to be dominated by really well-built pretender designs, built around a specific synergy with your nation that is sort of, I suppose, tuned as close to perfection as the players are able to make it. Even in relatively low-skill games, anyone can design like an Awake Expander, for example, and everyone can be very efficient, at least to a limited degree. Accidental Ascension throws that completely out of the window by giving you essentially a random pretender, and the game can be stupid when it comes to designing pretenders. Now, you get some degree of selection because you can toss a bad design out, but you can't toss a design out that's okay, because if you toss it out and get something terrible, you might be stuck. So there's a temptation to take an okay god. So let's have a look at who we've got in this game. First of all, Pythium. So Pythium, the strong troop, but crapsack mage, late Roman Empire mystery cult sort of nation. The god that they've been given is a dormant titan with opposite of order. Turmoil. Production 3, now this is excellent so they can get their resource-intensive troops out. Cold 3, it'll hurt their income, They would prefer neutral, but they'll take it. But we're very happy about cold 3 because it means if they don't die early game, if we have to fight them later on, even though they're very far away from us, we'll be right at home in their dominion. So we want to see as many people with cold scales as possible. We want to fight people with cold scales, and we don't want to fight people with heat scales. Growth 0, it's okay. Misfortune 2, Magic 2. And then Fire 2, Air 4, Water 2, this weird rainbow titan with lots of shock resist, Spirit Sight, Farcaster, 2 times Undying, and Undead Command. Would you ever take this weird rainbowy titan? Dormant? No, I don't think so. So, yeah, good luck to them. I'm not sure what this god is really good for. I mean, there's a lot of forging diversity, I guess, in there. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't think it's great. But I'm guessing what happened is they saw Production 3 and Magic 2, and they were like, yep, done deal. That plus no death scales is a done deal for them because they just need Production 3 for their troops. The God of Man. The God of Man is a dormant expander. Yay. However, for being a dormant expander, it's got a decent bless. So Fortitude, Regen, and then Forest Survival. So this is lol. They've gone up 2 very expensive nature points, 2 horrifically expensive nature points to go from N7 to N9, and they bought Forest Survival with it. Good job, AI. That was totally worth having this guy dormant rather than awake. Yeah. Drain 2, Misfortune 2, Growth Neutral, Heat 2, which we don't like, Production 2, which they'll want. Again, some relatively resource-intensive troops. Their heavy infantry and cavalry of man are decent, particularly I think the infantry in terms of efficiency. When we encounter them, we'll do a brief analysis of them. Dominion 4 is low considering he's dormant, but when he wakes up, this will be a perfectly serviceable expander. But waking up at turn 12, and thus not so useful at expansion, but perhaps helpful in fighting back in an early war. Earth 8 and Fortitude and Regen means this is one tough pig. It's just a very expensive pig that is going to spend 12 turns asleep. Ulm, played by the person who was Smokey the Carrion Bear in our previous game, has drawn an Allfather, so Odin's here. Odin is awake and rock an Air Shield, Arcane Finesse, and Withering Weapons. For Ulm, again, not super rested on their Sacreds. This is okay. One thing I can think of is the Air Shield on their Sacred Cavalry makes their Sacred Cavalry immune to Iron Blizzard if they want to throw some Iron Blizzard while their cavalry charge. But they won't be doing that, and here's why. Sloth 2. So that instantly means that we're going to be looking at sort of Wolf, Ranger, and Summons Ulm, rather than like heavy cavalry infantry Ulm. Sloth 2 just is too debilitating for that. The Cold 3 is good for us, and we know Ulm is a neighbour of ours, so the Cold 3 means that we're in a good position and they're unlikely to want to bully us. This is good income scale here. Growth 1 is fine. Misfortune 2 will hurt a little bit, but no one really cares too much about dumping Misfortune. And Drain 1. Drain 1 is unfortunate, but not critical at all. Misfortune and Drain together, but then again, I ran 3 on both for Nazca, and I got through it. So this is decent. This is not an expander by itself. It's not survivable enough. However, with a good team, it can be handy, and it'll get some early buffs that'll make it much better. Misforming this god will help immensely. Phlegra got an awake expander. The Myrmecolion. The Myrmecolion eats population, causes unrest, and is generally unpleasant to be around, but it is cheap. And they got it awake. So they've gone for something that is okay as an expander. However, the Bless is not really an expansion Bless. It's got superior morale and inspirational presence. So it's a very inspiring lion ant thing. But, decent with slave troops, which Phlegra has. Assuming you're not using Iron Bound and Iron Guard, who have very good morale. Mountain Survivor, okay. And Unbreakable, 1, 2, 3, 4. They spent 4 on Unbreakable, which reduces the chance of getting afflictions, I believe. This is not great. It might protect the god a little bit, but there's no sort of protection buff in here. They'll need to do a little bit of research to make it really tough, but with a little bit of support, it'll help early expansion, and it's awake to do so. The Production 3 is probably why they picked it, as well as it being an expanded chassis, which is Awake. Production 3, again, late age Flagrant Troops. So Mouflon Cataphracts, Iron Guard, Cyclope Warriors, they're all very resource intensive. So this is the production they needed. The Magic 3 is also very good, given that Flagra continues to have the Slave Researcher option. So that makes their research very efficient, which is good. Unfortunately, Death Scales and Misfortune, but you have to pay a price somewhere. The Death Scales will hurt them, but hey, their capital's going to blow up anyway around turn 20 something. So, what's a little Death Scales if, Enceladus is just going to blow up the city anyway. And Cold 2, great. Love Cold 2. More Cold Scales. Everyone should take Cold Scales, so the Atlantians can visit. Xibalba, Heat 3, boo. Okay, so Xibalba has an imprisoned rainbow with a major incarnate bless. So it literally it's a true rainbow. Every single path of magic. Fire 7, Air 4, Water 5, Earth 5, Astral 3, which means Magic Jewel. Death 2, why? Nature 3, Blood 4. It's got Awe. The shock resist is okay, cool. Mind you, remember, Xibalba's Sacred lineup, not hankering for a gigantic bless, but there's stuff they can do later in terms of summons. They'll do lots of blood stuff that will benefit from a bless, and we'll examine that more if we look at them. Or shock resistance, water walking, major cold resist, which means fire and shock and blood surge. But again, I'm not immediately worried about these, and these two are offline at game start. The scales are okay. They don't need production as Xibalba. It's Heat 3, very low Dominion. Growth 2 is good. Misfortune, there's nothing lethal here. It's not what you'd want as a big blood power. You'd want even more growth and you'd want some order, but this will do. Midgard, Bitch Queen, I believe. Female werewolf. Awake. So Awake, this is an invulnerable chassis, I believe, so maybe usable. And we've got some small blesses that will be online. Strength of the Flesh, Unaging, Undead Command, Undying, Major Magic Resist. Major Magic Resist will be handy. So they actually need a bless because I'll be using Vans and Varnier Thugs early on. So this is okay. Unaging is completely freaking useless for Vans. The Varnier already lived to be a millennia old. They don't need Unaging. The Strength of the Flesh will make them hit a little bit harder. Undead Command, I don't think they need, but they'll take it. 2 points of Undying, yeah, okay. The Major Magic Resist is good. But you got an Awake unit, it's pretty harmless. They have no production, no order. They're Cold 3, hooray. They didn't get growth. They got a little bit of magic, which helps when you're Midgard. Your research may be not as crap as in previous eras, but, a little bit of magic between friends never hurt anyone. We've got a Solar Eagle for German. German, the Japanese samurai nation. We've got... Okay. This is much more diverse than I'd normally expect of a Solar Eagle with fire, air, nature. Okay. Inspirational Presence. So again, the morale buffs are everywhere. Air Shield. Incarnate. Imprisoned. Good design. Low light vision and unaging. Unaging, again, yeah, okay, whatever. Low light vision, yeah, okay, whatever. These things, low light vision and spirit sights, are more things that I'll want to remember later if I fight them, so that I remember that darkness isn't the killer that it otherwise would be to their mage's precision. That's basically what that comes down to. The scales are bland and unoffensive. Ones or zeros everywhere, except for production 3. When German gets production 3, which they need to get their samurai out in any decent numbers, they'll take it. Samurai and Shark Warriors, both resource intensive, both rely on production 3. Abyssia. Nasagen is in it for the memes, and he's bringing the memes. He has to wait until turn 36, but he has chosen an Ore Regeneration Imprisoned Lion. So Abyssia obviously likes Sacred Assassins in the late age. And Ore on a Sacred Assassin early game would be kind of cool. The regen, not so much, they don't have many hit points, but the Ore would be really cool. Unfortunately, turn 36. Did he choose this because he'd mulliganed? Did he choose this because he wanted growth 3 and heat 2 and was worried about things being ruined? Did he really need not sloth? I don't know. This is not an optimal Abyssian pretender, but Nasagen is a king and he'll work with it. Gath. Gath is awake Fire Shield, Twist Fate. It's okay Awake Bless. The Fire Shield in particular can do something to... so he's next to Orm. So Ormish Wolves need to be very careful of Levite Zealots and Gibborim bearing the Fire Shield Bless, and Twist Fate, which negates the first hit, which is decent on human-sized troops. It'll negate the first hit to Levite Zealots. However, it's sort of a live fast, die young build, because while you've got an Awake Expander with a Fire Shield, you've got Death 2. And Gath is a blood nation, so this is going to start eating up their population relatively early on. The fact it's got Dom 6 and an Awake means their Dominion will spread relatively quickly, because you get 3 checks off the Awake Pretender, their population will start dying. So Demise, this is brave, this is very aggressive. This is an aggressive choice going with the Awake Expander with a decent Bless in exchange for Death 2 scales. Bogarus, General Confusion himself, another Odin. This time, again, Awake. This time a Sloth one, which is unfortunate. Bogarus would have liked production, because Bogarus would have wanted to, if they're going to expand with troops, they want to use their cavalry, the Malia Druzhina, and the Druzhina require significant resources in order to produce. So Sloth 2 hurts, just like it hurts Orm. So again, with the Sloth Allfathers. Cold 3, loving it, happy. They're a cold preference, so they don't mind it, but I'm happy to have a neighbour with Cold 3. Growth 3, excellent. This is okay. Magic 1, they appreciate with their cheap and many mages. Minor Magic Resist, Arcane Finesse, Withering Weapons. There's nothing in this Bless here. But then again, Bogarus is not going to be spamming its recruitable Sacred anyway, so they're not going to get much use out of the Withering Weapons, but their Sacred mages might appreciate these. This is just unoffensive and was probably selected for being unoffensive. I'm not sure what his other options are. We'll have to see if he mentions it on his videos. The God of Erythia is a snake. Hasfrex. We've got, another imprisoned monster. Loving the imprisoned monster meta. It's the Dominion 9 imprisoned monster, but he probably took it for the Growth 3, Magic 3, so like alright scales, paid for by the fact that it's just Death 5, it has Undead Command and Withering Weapons. So, Withering Weapons on the Erythian Sacreds. Let me think about that for a moment. So the Erythian Sacreds have Sun Ore, but are otherwise relatively unoffensive, high quality, medium to heavy infantry. Okay. Like, against some enemies, maybe, but generally I'm not a big fan of Withering Weapons in general, but it is non-incarnate as a Bless, which is good because this guy ain't waking up for a long time. And then we've got, I think, 3 more. Did 3 more? I miscounted. Alright, Raga. Raga is a dormant Sphinx, I believe that is, with Fate Weaving and Stygian Flesh. So we've got a little bit of invulnerability and, of course, Fate Weaving. I like Fate Weaving. This gives late game strong astral access late game and a little bit of death. So that might be handy if Raga stays around. The scales are... this is not the sort of Bless that a late-age Raga probably would have wanted instinctively, though, because Zeedans would have loved something that's better for expansion. This won't even be online. But Stygian-fleshed Zeedans later on will be pretty good, I imagine. It'll give them a little extra nat prot, toughen them up quite a lot against enemies that aren't us, because we have magic weapons. There's no production here, which is unfortunate for the Zeedans, but it is a Heat Raga, which is generally considered to be the stronger Raga. It's Growth, which is generally considered to be better than non-Growth. Misfortune 3 is not a terrible scale when it's paired with other good scales that limit the number of negative events that it can trigger. So Luck can be Luck and Drain, or Luck and Turmoil can play really badly together if they're both negative. So it's a dormant monster with an okay Bless and Growth and Heat. Raga will be fine. Utgard, to my north. So it's an Awake Raven of the Underworld with scales and death weapons. It's a Death 9 Raven. So, late game. All the death access you could ever want. This guy will be a great caster late game if it can boost up its HP. The scales are okay. Cold 2, Growth 1, Magic 1, which they want for their Sith Conor based research. Prod, they didn't really need unless they want to go mass Huskarls, which they probably won't, but like, this isn't great, but that's the theme of Accidental Ascension, right? No one, these aren't great. This is us. We're a statue of beasts. We are imprisoned with a double incarnate bless. We got recuperation and air shield, neither of which are online right now. We are, as you saw, Dominion 10. And then, okay, scales. Why did I take this? I took this because it could have been worse. This was my first pick. I could have gotten all sorts of things that would have ruined Atlantis. Sloth Scales ruined Atlantis. Not being cold ruins Atlantis. Death Scales would cause a mulligan. I like magic. There's enough here. The god doesn't need to do anything. This is late game nature and air that might be handy to me. Like, I can break into air big by conjuring off air 6 and nature 6. So I took it. It's fine. It's unoffensive. It's not what I would have used. But I used an Immobile Pretender last time. This is just a less good Immobile Pretender. I had way more scales than this. I could... nerfing that Dominion down. You could just buy growth and production and... anyway. And then finally, Patala, the monkeys. They have an Awake Man-Eater with fire and shock resistance, strong Vichet, and strength of the flesh. Little bit vulnerable because there's no protection here, but fire and shock resistance is a good utility bless. The scales are okay, mostly in the sense that it's got growth and magic 3, which the cheap monkey mages will love. They'll love this magic 3. The heat scales, which discourages me from attacking them, but their troops are so bad that I would anyway. Sloth doesn't matter as much for Patala, given their troops. This is okay. This is not woeful, and that's the theme for a lot of these. A lot of these are not hilariously terrible, although the imprisoned monster meta can probably die in a hole. They're okay, and that's what makes Accidental Ascension special. Gone are the super optimized gods. God are the powerhouses. In are the Joe averages, the lords of mediocrity, and the occasionally just weird. So yeah, that's the game. I'll wait a few more turns to progress before I update, because I think my next update will be the middle of my expansion, depending on which turns I've cached. But I just want to say, yep, this game is happening. Here are the gods. Here's a little bit of a thought through. I'll start negotiating and reporting on those negotiations next episode. Cheers.